The significance, I remember his class was him telling us that when they had their thumbs up, that actually translated to F you. Like they did not physically want people there. But because we didn't understand the messaging and did not communicate well, and we didn't translate what they were saying in their communications, we totally misread that. It was literally all over the magazines. They constantly had pictures of people putting their thumbs up like, yeah, they're happy we're here. No, in fact, they were not happy. And those images were also young people. And that just gives an example of, it's really important when you're trying to understand someone else's culture, community, language, and all that, that you really take the time to be disciplined in understanding it. Like for one, her being very fluent, because there are things that you would miss if you weren't fluent in that language because you're not picking up on little nuances. Little messages can either go in opposite directions, right? Infinitely in different directions, honestly. But just to give you that quick example, additionally, because she was fluent in language, she didn't have to have a translator come in and you have somebody could be saying the wrong things or telling them the wrong things. She was able to communicate directly with officials, with Russian officials in particular, and with regards to like their scholarship, right? Their documents. So to have that level of linguistic experience and exposure, once again, makes her a high level asset. So like the question becomes like, why does that still matter today? Right? Because I was foreshadowing this, right? Why does that matter today? Oh my goodness, for so many reasons, right? Because like, even though the Soviet Union collapsed, you still see like the legacy of certain things, right? Like many geopolitical structures to this day still come from like the Cold War, like certain structural, strategic types of movements still come from things that happened like back then, like NATO alliances, Eastern Europe security dynamics, Russian military strategy, power competitions between major states. Like experts trained in Cold War strategic thinking often understand the historical logic behind like current tensions, because they have a brain that's structured to see certain movements, right? Because they've had exposure to it, so they can see it a little bit easier. It's easier to recognize a pattern when you've seen it before, is it not? Not to say that you couldn't understand it, hey, this is a pattern over time, but it's certainly much easier to recognize certain patterns when you have observed it before. What? Because you recognize the pattern. Y'all get what I'm putting down? Okay. So I'm trying to chop this up in a way where it all flow properly, right? So from that perspective, right, Condoleezza Rice's career began with like studying Soviet military strategy and advising the White House during the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? And that means her expertise is rooted in understanding, right? Big key word, understanding how major power systems shift during periods of global tension. How major power systems shift during periods of global tension. Because we've heard a lot of conversation about changing of leadership and regime changes, and we've seen a lot in the news, right? So this actually is an area where she is very, very strong, right? So this gives us more insight into why is she being called in? Why is she being called in now? Right? Because it's like, okay, because she been around, right? She has been around. But why call her in now? That's why they called her in now. Let me go pull this other one up, because we're going to come back to this question, right? And why does this situation require Middle East experience, right? Why does this require Middle East experience? Let me get my... Let's see if it pops up, right? Even before I jump to that piece, I want to slide into this other quick thing I want us to address before we slide to the next piece, right? before we jump to question 2, let's look at the Project 25 lens, because y'all know I tend to go there. If you're interested in all the times that Iran popped up in Project 25, and there were quite a few references, I have a whole other live dedicated to that. Go ahead and go onto my page, go onto my channel, look that up. There is already a playlist being created that will show all the times that I've read content from Project 25. So feel free to go look at that. This particular focus on Project 25 is kind of isolating in on what her background was, because she speaks Russian fluently. She has all this background. And some policies discussed identify Russia as a major geopolitical concern, right? Because when we looked at Project 25, there were 5 countries that were listed as high-level threats and concerns, right? So 5 countries with which the Project 25 identify as countries of concern, right? Russia was one of them. Venezuela was one of them. Iran is one of them. North Korea is one of those. And China is one of those, right? So, right, Rice's career focused heavily on Russian and Soviet Union strategic behavior. Strategic behavior. We know behavior can be applied to, so strategic behavior. And his background helps us understand why they consulted with her, because what we know that this administration has been doing a lot of things that are in alignment with Project 25, right? We have observed that. We're not going to say everything in Project 25 must happen, but what we're saying is quite a bit has occurred, and there's been a lot of strong alignment, which we have been tracking here on this channel, and other people have tracked on their channels. So, how would I put this concisely? So Condoleezza Rice built her career studying Soviet military strategy and even served in the White House, right? We talked about how the collapse of the Soviet Union happened while she was in that advisor role. And now the reason that her background still matters is because of the geopolitical system that came out of the Cold War, right? It never really disappeared in Russia. Well, let's just say it just never really disappeared, right? Let's just say in general, because I said it was also in other places too. So, like Russia in particular inherited some of the strategy framework that the Soviet Union once held. And modern policy discussions still identify Russia as a major geopolitical concern. And when I'm talking about discussions, one of them in particular that we can track, we can access, if you go on my channel, the static version that Heritage has put up on their own page, a link to that is available for you to review on your own. But we also have clips of things here as well for you to read and you to see it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it, go look it up. But we see that it identified Russia as what? A major geopolitical concern. So when someone has spent decades, because listen, she was that girl in 89 when she first got that position, because she was already a political science instructor. She was a political science scientist, right? She was teaching at Stanford.